This is Daf Yomi Gemara Basra Daf Sadik Zayin. And we're holding the bottom of Sadik Vav Amid Beis, and we'll learn of this month, the month of Elul, as we go towards Rosh Hashanah. The last few days of Elul has been generously sponsored by a close friend of the Daf as a Zchos Aliyas Neshama for Aster Rizal Basra מאיר B'siyata Dishmaya. As we conclude the month, all the learning should bring Aster Rizal Basra מאיר to an incredibly close place in Gan Eden Shel Maila. So we're holding in the last line of Sadik Vav and Beis, and we're in the middle of trying to figure out the Machlaikas in the Tanakama. The Tanakama is going to hold that there's going to be times that it's not going to be considered Yayin. We'll get back into the fine details of the Machlaikas as we dive deeper into the Gemara. So we start with the Kasha. Says the Gemara, ask the Gemara if it's more than the Kdei Midasai, if the amount of water introduced into the item, is there really a machlaikas? But we learned in a Mishnah in Ma'israis, as we turn over to Zadik Zayin Amid Aleph, Hamisamed, Rashi points out, we're talking about water. We're talking about putting water into lees. The Rashbam, we're talking about creating wine, steeping the lees in wine, as Rashbam says, Mayim b'shmarim. What's the halacha if you do such? V'nasan mayim b'mida, and you pour water the requisite amount to matzah kedei midasai, and then you find that there's an equivalent amount of water that you poured in. For example, you poured in 4 cups of water onto the shemarim, and then there's only 4 cups at the end. So clearly nothing really happened. What's the halacha? The halacha is pater. This mixture is exempt. It's pater from ma'aser. Why? Because it doesn't have a din of yayin. Why? Because basically, the amount of water that went in is the amount of wine. And clearly, it's just flavored water. So there's no chiyav in ma'aser. Rav Yehuda mechayiv. Comes in Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda says, no, even in this case, even though it might not be considered yayin klape other halachais, however, there is a chiyav of ma'aser. So now explains the Gemara, what's this machlekes Tanakam and Rav Yehuda? Explains the Gemara, ad kam loy pligi. Until here, there's no machlekes el b'chdei midasai. The machlekes Tanakama and Rav Yehuda is only b'chdei midasai, is only when it's an equal amount. But let's say it was even more, meaning you put in 3 or 4 cups of water, and now how much do you have? You have 5 cups. So now clearly the shemarim created something. Clearly that would, yes, have a din of wine. So we see that according to everyone, it's going to have a din of wine. The problem is that Rava on yesterday's daf concluded, and he said even Yaiser Mechdei Midasai does not have a din of yayin according to the Rabbanan. Answers the Gemara on the 4th line that Huadin Davil Yaiser Mechdei Midasai Pliki. That really it's not true that even when it's more than Kedei Midasai, there is indeed a machlekes in Rav Yehuda and the Tanakam of the Chacham. But then, of course, the obvious kasha, if they argue even Yaiser Mechdei Midasai, so why would they make their machlekes by Mechdei Midasai? The Rav Yehuda that teaches that even in their case, which of course is a massive chiddush, that even when you put in 3 cups and 3 cups come out, clearly there's no real wine here. Even in that case, a tremendous chiddush and chumrah of Rav Yehuda that will have a din of wine. We conclude part A of today's shiur by Minei Rav Nachum Bar Yitzchak, 8 lines down. Rav Chiba Ravin Shmarim Sheish Bem Ta'am Yayin. What is the halacha if we have shmarim that have the flavor of wine? What is the bracha? The Gemara asks, and the Rashbam over here explains what is the case. The Birkas Hayayin. If he knew the aforementioned brayso, he would just answer whether we paskin like dacherim or not. Clearly he did not, and therefore he responded, Tam yayin mahu, Amar le, Rav Chi responded, Mi savris, chamru, Do you think that this is wine? Kiyua ba'alma, this is merely kiyua ba'almahu, which is just flavored liquid, and therefore will not have a din of yayin. Now, just to mention, this statement of kiyua ba'alma is a very large statement, la halacha. Anytime something doesn't create the item that we're looking for, it's deemed kiyua ba'alma, just colored. For example, just to give one example, if you do malicha on meat, and then the requisite amount, so now there's no more dam now there's no more blood. But then you go and you see some blood in the meat. What is it? No, it's kiyua ba'alma. It doesn't have a din of dam. That's what the words mean over here. That is the answer of the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, we continue. Shmarim shel truma rishain v'sheni aser. Says the Gemara 12 lines down. The first one line is rishain, wine that was created. Again, you're pouring water onto the shmarim. Rishain v'sheni aser. The first and second pourings have a din of truma. Again, the shemarim are truma, so the sediment, the lees, are truma. You pour water through, water comes out. Says the Gemara, the first and second pouring have a din of truma, and to aser shlishi mut. Rameir Aimer, no. Av shlishi b'noisin tam, says Rameir, even the shlishi is aser if it has the tam, if it tastes like wine. That's the halach of truma. Shal meiser rishain. Now, what if it's meiser rishain? Now the score changes. Says the right, Vishal Meiser. Now let's say it's Meiser, Rishain Aser, the first time you pour it's Aser, Sheni Motor. Rameir again, one step higher, Av Sheni B'Naisin Tam. Vishal Hektish, let's say it's Shemarim of Hektish, it belongs to the based on Begdash, that even the Shlishi is Aser V'Ravi Motor, Rameir Ma'af Ravi B'Naisin Tam. So you have a brisa, 3 different levels. We have the level of Truma, we have the level of a Meiser, and we have the level of hektish. At each level, the Tanakama holds only at one stage. It becomes aser as the din of that which it came from, and the Rameir always takes it one step further if it has a taste of wine. Ask the Gemara, smack in the middle of the Amid, the first line is Remini. Ask the Gemara, Remini, I'll ask you a contradiction. Says the Raisa, if you have Shemarim, you pour water on it of hektish. La'olam aser. It's always aser. Shalmeiser la'olam mutter. So says the Gemara, this brisa is a bomb everywhere. Kasha hektish, kasha meiser. Explains the Gemara, hektish, like kasha, kamikdush, like gov, kamikdush, as dam, and there's different types of hektish. The second brisa is dealing with kedushas hagov, and therefore that's why it's always aser. The first brisa is talking about kedushas adamim. It was only given to Beis Hamikdash for the value, and therefore it depends on the level. Meiser nami kasha kan b'meiser v'adai kan b'meiser demai, which is a level of suffix. If it's meiser v'adai, then that's the first brisa where it goes by level, where it's meiser demai. Therefore, it will go with the second brisa that says shal meiser lo'ila mutter due to the suffix that it is. So that is part 2 of today's shir, which is at what level the kedusha, the truma, the meiser, the hektish is transported and transferred onto the liquid that comes out of these shemar. Continues the Gemara, Rav Yechon Misham Rav Shimon ben Yoitzadok. The aforementioned discussion, whatever we hold with regards to the liquid that comes out with klape iser, says Rav Shimon Yoitzadok kacham relinin achsheron, has the same halacha with regard to hechsher, which means being machsher, something, creating something susceptible. Mekabel toma. For example, it comes to truma. The second time is the din of yayin. The third is water. So too, with regard to being mekabel toma, the second one will have a din of wine, klap eight kabbalas toma, and the third will have a din of mayim. But now says the Gemara, Shkoyach, Lechsher and Demai. What level of hechsher, what level of creating something susceptible to kabel toma? If it has a din of water, but water is a liquid. Says the Gemara, what's the difference? Both of them are liquids, both water, both wine. So who cares whether it's shlishi, whether it's revi, whether it's sheni, whether it's yain, whether it's mayim? Either way, it is making it susceptible. Answers the Gemara, 12 lines from the bottom. The first word on line is Laisricha. Says the Gemara, Shetandoi B'mei geshamim, that you steeped the shmarim, the leaves, in rain water. And therefore, rainwater is not something that has a din of making something chshar lekabel toma. Therefore, that's going to be the chilik. Says the Gemara, but 1 second. Anytime you take rainwater, so you're right, rainwater in a vacuum doesn't make something susceptible to be makabel toma. But says the Gemara, 1 second. When you put it into a kli, you catch the rainwater, now you poured it onto the shmarim, therefore you are machshavit, and now it has the status of a liquid mukhshar lekabel toma. Lo yitzricha shenita me'ilav, on its own, the rain fell onto the shmarim. That's the discussion. Says the Gemara, but says the Gemara, still we have a problem. Why? Because as it falls, each little bit that falls off and has a little bit of flavor, tastes a little bit more like wine. Shows that you want them as wine. We're discussing a case that as it rains, the cow is drinking from it, and therefore that water will never be able to have the din of a hush of a liquid. It will never be makabel toma, and that's going to be the case in which it'll make a difference. Klabe, whether it's the din of mayim, water, whether it's din of yayin, wine, with regard to hushar lekabel toma. Continuing the discussion, part 3 or part 4 of today is now, let's continue this discussion. We're in the middle of wine, let's continue. Amar Rav Zutra bar Tuvia Amar Rav Ein Oimrim Kiddush Hayoim Elo Ala Yayin Aroyu Lenisach Al Gabi Mizbeach. You can only make Kiddush on wine that is fitting to be poured on the Mizbeach. Lamute Mai, says the Gemara. What does this come to exclude? Wine from the press. Wine migito is a form of grape juice. Vatani Rav Chia. Yain mikito lo yavi v'mhevi kosher. You're right, you shouldn't bring your lenisa chamayim. But if you did, it's kosher. V'kivim d'mhevi kosher, then based on the rule that we just said, then it's yes, kosher for kiddush. And if you look at chilunami, you should be able to use it for kiddush. So what is the case that it's going to be totally whether it can be used lenisa chamayim, whether you can make kiddush on it? How do I know? The Amar Rava, says Rava, as we turn over to Sadik Zayin, all mid base. You could squeeze a cluster of grapes and do what with it? And says the Gemara, so it can't be coming to exclude grape juice. Continues the Gemara, Viela limute mai velimute. So rather, what's it coming to exclude? Mipia umishuleha, from the mouth or from the bottom of the barrel. That when it said that the wine is not kosher lekiddush, it meant the wine from the lip or from the bottom of the barrel. But that can't be. It's going to be kosher. So what is the case that we have yayin? That because it cannot be used l'nisach, therefore it can't be used for kiddush. Yayin kushi must be coming to exclude yayin kushi, black wine, boyrek, white wine, helistion wine, shalmartev wine from a cellar, shaltzimukim, grape, raisin wine. But if that's true again, all these things you shouldn't bring l'nisach. You are true, it's not appropriate. But again, then heavy kosher. So what is the case that's not kosher for kiddush? Rather, must be coming to exclude sour wine, mazug, mixed wine, megula, open wine, shemarim, wine from sediment, sharei, something that smells bad. Titania, maybe pasul. All these are basal. So says the Gemara, 1 second. Which of these wines is Rav talking about? If it's talking about sour wine, that's not so simple. Why not? Poured wine. Says the Gemara, 1 second. When you mix wine with water, you do the mezika process that makes it more palatable to drink. Therefore, klape kiddush, it should be better. Why? Smack in the middle of the amma. The first one in line is de amma. Tomer Rav Yesi Rav Chanina Moidim Chacham Rav Lazar Kaishel Bracha Shein Mevarach Lavachit L'Teichei Mayim. Klape o bracha, it's even better to have water in it. So why would that not be able to be wine used for kiddush? Elmute megula, says the Gemara. Open wine sakanu. It's a sakana. So of course you can't make kiddush on it. No one would ever drink for it. Of course, we parenthetically mentioned that whenever we learn about yayin megula, It's not a din just in wine, number one, it's any liquid. Number two, notice the Gemara said nothing about it being open overnight. Anytime you have an open liquid, that is what it is talking about. And number three is that such a sakana, the Shulchan Aruch Paskins, does not really exist nowadays because snakes are not common. But either way, back to our Gemara as we wrap up today's shir. Tilsa. If the case of the shemarim is you put in 3 vasi arba and 4 cups of wine come out, what do you mean that's gavaldik wine? Idrami tilsa vasi tilsa upalga 3.5. That's what going full circle back to the beginning of today's shir, which was the end of yesterday's shir. That if you put in 3 and you get a little more than 3, that's a machlekes whether it's good. Ella says the Gemara, that's the case, that wine that should not be used for kiddush because it cannot be used for nisach hamayim. Megula, v'avagav the avre misunenes yain megula, which we said is a sakana. But let's say you pour it through a sifter. So now you know there's no venom. Now you know it's not a sakana. But still, you should not use it for a kiddush. Now we're learning that there's a special mile of kiddush. That wine that is left uncovered should not be used for kiddush. Why? Reb Nechemia, because like Reb Nechemia holds, it says in the pasuk, offer it, show it to your governor. Will show favor, will show countenance. If you put a bad quality wine as a carbon, Hashem says, what do I need it for? So a special maila. You should not use wine that's left uncovered. Why? Because it's inferior quality. And that's the chiddush, you should not use it for a kiddush. Of course, we point and we parenthetically mention, what do you mean? Does that mean that you can't use wine that's left open? And this is the reason why many chassidim actually have bechers with a cover on it, because they don't want to leave their wine open for a moment. Why not? Because shading Gemara, the Gemara here says, and this, of course, is brought down lahalach. That what? That anytime wine is left uncovered, it's an inferior quality, therefore it should not be used. We'll just very quickly mention that Lamais is in our Chashulchan that says, look at the tam. The tam is that it's a low quality wine, but if we know that aerating our wines makes it better, then clearly it's not a problem. We conclude today's share by Meir of Kana, Chamua, Deram Mershashim, Mirava, Chamer, Chivaryon, Mao. What about white wine? Can you use it for Nesachim? And subsequently, Kiddush, Amali, Altera, Yayin, Kiyis, Adoim. You should not use wine only that is red. So we see that red wine is, of course, the best. That's where it comes from. That for Kiddush, you should use red wine. Kankanim b'shram v'chulu tana pistais na'is u'migrafa. He says the Gemara, the Bryce Tatoa pitasais inferior kags is na'is u'migufarais, attractive and sealed with sulfur. Cracked barrels, however, are not good at all, meaning this is going back to the case of the Mishnah, how much of the inferior wine you're allowed to include in the sale. And the Mishnah said 10 inferior ones per 100, but it's only something that's a lower level inferiority, but not something that's mamish cracked. We'll stop over here. I'll pick it up from the Mishnah, B'siyata Dishmaya.